Hi everybody, Rob Mize here, and today I'd like to look at After Effects and its capabilities in regard to the design and creation of animated characters. Although After Effects may not be the first tool that comes to mind for this purpose, I think you may be pleasantly surprised with the results. Recently, I had a client who wanted a talking tomato to serve as narrator for their program, and after a bit of experimentation, I thought this could indeed be accomplished using After Effects, and the result is this featuring Tomas the tomato.
Good morning, I'm Tomas. Do you ever think about where your food comes from? How did it get to your grocery store, school, or farmer's market?
By the way, that's my son Will providing the voice. Now, before we get into the animation of speech, let's first look at the design of the character and how that's created. Tomas here is a relatively simple design, an Adobe Illustrator file provided by our client. But let's see what we can come up with starting from scratch. I'm going to revive the character from my last tutorial, Candace Be Real, in order to give her a much needed makeover. Now, when it comes to the initial design process, I am strictly old school. I start with pencil and paper and make a rough sketch of what I think I want. Then I outline the drawing in pen to give me good, strong, contrasting strokes to work with. To get my drawing into the computer, I'll just snap a picture with my phone, email it to myself, download the attachment on my computer, and I'm ready to start in After Effects. Now you'll see I have a comp opened here called Canvas, and this is my drawing. I've positioned it, scaled it, and put a mask around it. And I'm going to use that just as a guide for the image we'll create from shapes. Now I could come up here to Auto Trace and trace that on luminance values, but that's going to give me a much more complex image than I want and a lot more vertices to deal with in those masks. So I'm not going to do that. Rather, I'm going to choose my pen tool, and making sure I don't have any other layer chosen, I'll just click here and start creating an outline for the face. And I try to use as few vertices as possible. I won't ask you to endure the entire point-by-point construction of this character in real time, but as I explain the process and after you have an idea of what's going on, I'll go ahead and move on to the next step. And I think that'll serve our purpose because we're going to just open up these shy layers and choose this head layer, and we'll shy the rest of those away and turn that on. We'll get rid of that shape we just created and see one that was created earlier. As you can see, I've got this image here at 60% opacity, so we can use it as a guide to create this layer and all these other ones that we're going to be taking a look at. I'm using a radial gradient for the fill of the face and the head. Let's turn off this image and we can see that for this face layer down here that we've got a radial gradient, and these are a couple of skin tones. And that's just to give me a sense of the shape of the face, just to highlight and then just a little darker around the edges to give some dimension there. Now these other shapes, these create the nose, and if you'll take a look here, these are just shapes with no stroke and a solid fill. I find I could get a much cleaner and smoother shape that way than if I used strokes. I didn't like that edge there, so I just used shapes to create those lines. But once I had those, I came over here and used Add Group, and I'll call this group Nose, and let's bring it on top of this shape 6. And we'll grab these shapes 1 through 6. Those are my nose shapes, and we'll just drag that into that nose group now. So they function as a single element rather than a collection of 6 different ones. Okay, next we added a couple of eyebrows right there, and then some hair. That hair has a bit of a stroke on it, as you can see. Like these other elements, it's just a collection of Bezier points creating the shape that makes up the hair and all the other elements in this image. We also added a stroke with no fill to create some hairlines and the hair up here. And then for a little style, we added an ellipse with our ellipse tool. And as you can see, that has a radial gradient to it that helps give it that sense of shape. And use those little handles there to adjust that gradient. That's a real handy feature. Let's reveal the eye layer now. And the eyes were drawn on just like these other elements. You have the eyeball, the iris, a reflected highlight. You have the eyelid, and unless you're creating a cyclops or maybe a pirate, you've got that times 2. Add that with what you might want to do animation-wise, and you have a complex feature that deserves some thought as you plan that out. So I started with the eyeballs here, and you can see those have a radial gradient. Again, just a gradual shading to give some sense of shape to the eyeball. And then an iris. This iris is simply a black ellipse with a blue stroke on it. You can adjust the size of the ellipse and the size of the stroke to get the ratio between the pupil and iris that you want. And then a reflected highlight, which is just an ellipse that has been rotated a bit. And so I took those 2 elements and then Command D created a duplicate that I dragged into the other eye. Now, of course, we already have that created. So let me delete those duplicates and put back what we originally had. The next shape to make the eye complete are the eyelids. And let's just take a look at these individually. Let's turn off some of these other elements and just focus on the eyelid. And you'll see I have a shape with a slight stroke, 1/2 pixel, that begins up here, curves down here. Again, these are just Bezier curves. And then comes up here to 1, 2, 3 points to create an eyelash. Again, 3 more, 3 more. It comes down here to create 2 more eyelashes on the lower lid, and then comes to this point. There, it doubles back up to the top here. Now note that even though this is not a closed shape, you can still add a fill to it. And that's what I have here. This fill of kind of a eyeshadow into a flesh tone. And so that stroke creates the eyelid and the eyelashes here. And I did it this way because of what I intend to do later with the animation. I've got both the eyeballs, the iris, the reflected highlight, and the eyelids there. Now, this is good, except when I go to animate the eyes, here's what I've got to take into account. Let's take a look at this iris. This is what we'll eventually animate. If we open up the transform there and move that down, you see what happens when it violates this space. So what this means, we need the eyes behind the face layer. So actually behind the head. But this also means now we need a mask in the face to reveal the eyes. And here I think is the quickest way to do that. Instead of using a mask, we're going to use these 2 shapes that we use for the eyeball as masks up here on the head layer. We'll just grab these and copy them, Command C. Come up to the head layer, Command V to paste them. Let's open that up, and there are our copies. Now, I'm going to hit Contents and add Merge Path. It's merging all these various paths into one. We want to reduce the effect of that merged path. So we'll do this by adding a group that we'll call Face. We'll just call that Face Group. And we'll take the face, the eyeballs, and the merged path and its stroke and gradient properties. Select everything. I'll unselect face so I can drag these other shapes into that. Let's come up here to Face and choose Gradient Fill and Command C to copy that. Come down to Gradient Fill on our merge path and Command V to paste that. Now let's take our stroke and make sure that width is 0. Now open up Merge Path and change the mode to Subtract. And there we go. Our eyes are revealed, and now we can take the eyelids from our eyes and use Command X to cut those, which automatically copies those. And now Command V to paste those eyelids on the head layer. Let's drag them up to the top, say underneath, right over the brow. Let's also make the control of the eyes a little easier by adding a group here on the eyes. Let's just call that eyes. And we'll take it up here to the top. Let's take the highlight and the iris for both eyes and drag that into that layer. Now we can open up the transform property for that group and animate them like so. And you see now, when we animate, the eyelids are now on the face, and so when we animate them, they cover the eyes. And we'll look at that animation in our next tutorial, I think. I don't believe we'll have a chance to get into that in this tutorial, but we will come back to it. Now I think we're ready to add the mouth. Let's see, let's bring that up over the head so it's on top there. And this is really a simple shape. It is the teeth, and counterintuitively, the teeth are on top of the lips. That's because the lips are a single shape, just using 4 vertices to control that shape. 1, 2, 3, 4. And this is relevant because it simplifies the animation that we'll be doing later, along with the teeth, and they too are just a collection of 4 Bezier points to create this shape. They're positioned in proximity to the lip so that you can grab both of those elements and then bring those down like so, and make adjustments a bit more quickly that way. Let's put this back where we had it, and let's give her a background and a shadow. The shadow is simply a duplicate of the head layer with everything in that deleted except the hair, earring, and face. Turn that on to see that we've added a drop shadow effect to this layer, and then we've clicked shadow only. So if we just eyeball that by itself, you can see there's our drop shadow. To go with our girl, Candace Be Real. So you can see, using these shapes, we can do some interesting animations there. I hope you all will join me for part 2 of this tutorial when we cover animation and make Candace talk and talk and talk. Till then, feel free to drop me a line and let me know how your projects are progressing. And as always, happy compositing.